to hear that. Perfect. So I know most of you, but for anyone who I don't know, hi, my name is Gabby. I'm the community manager at Grapevine. So welcome to Nonprofit Selection, Defining Your Criteria. And we facilitate these in partnership with Philanthropy Together. So this is one of 3 events we're doing quarterly. So each month we'll do a different one. This one, as well as developing shared values with your giving circle and the art of facilitation, hard conversations, and fostering engagement. So you'll see there'll be one of those every month, and they'll repeat quarterly. So I am going to just let you know a little bit about today. Basically, I'm going to hand it over to the Philanthropy Together team. We've got Taisha here, who's their director of engagement, and Isis, who is the chief I have this written down. I'm going to mess it up.
Strategy officer, doesn't
strategy
matter.
officer. Yes, I was like, it's people. They are going to facilitate the workshop. We'll be together for the next hour. Please ask your questions, put them in the chat. This is a really collaborative workshop, and just thrilled to get to do these monthly with this incredible team. So I am going to pass it over to them. And yeah, here we go.
Thank you, Gabby. Wonderful. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right into it. This is meant to be really collaborative and we want to answer your questions. That's why you all are here and not just watching the recording, but actually getting the chance to answer your questions live. So there will be time at the end for questions, but I really hope that you all feel free to ask things in the chat and go off mute if you want to interject and ask a specific question so we can tailor the content to you. So today is all about criteria and finding groups that you can give to through your group. We're Philanthropy Together. We launched 3 years ago tomorrow. So it's almost our 3rd birthday, right around the same time that Grapevine was starting. And our mission is to democratize and diversify philanthropy through the power of giving circles and collective giving. We do a lot of different things, but educational programs and trainings like these are one of them. Our team has decades of experience with giving circles of all shapes and sizes, and Ty, for example, trains hundreds of people how to start a giving circle and launch and strengthen their work. We have programs to get better at rooting your circle in equity work and other amazing things of trust. So lots of programming that we offer, and we welcome you to enjoy this and come to other work that we do. We always like grounding in what a giving circle even is. And obviously you all are here, but I hope that this definition really pushes on why are you in this work? What are you doing here? And so for us, a giving circle takes your minds and your talent and your financial ability seriously and makes giving a collaborative social experience. They create caring, generous communities of people who act intentionally, thoughtfully, and strategically together. So we want to start out with why you should even think about nonprofit selection and criteria. What does it matter? Can't we just pick a name from a hat? What is the reason why it's helpful to go a little bit deeper than that? And to ground you in that, I just want to pull up some of these stats, which some of you might have seen, some of you may have never seen these before, but when you think about where the funding actually flows in philanthropy, only 8% goes to organizations focused on communities of color. Only 1.8% goes to women's and girls' causes. And I see a lot of women and female identifying folks here today. So I know that this matters to all of you. Less than 1/3% goes to LGBTQ plus causes. And the list goes on. If you looked at Indigenous groups, if you looked at a number of different issue areas, the percentages are all really small. And of course, each of those percentages adds up to a whole. But I think the thing that always shocks me or makes me feel really sad is that a majority of the funding goes to really big university endowments and, large cultural institutions that have huge endowments. And so then the remaining piece of the pie, the final 20-30%, really gets cut down and chopped up into these very tiny percentages. And so I know a lot of your groups in the style of operating that you have, it's not issue specific, right? That you welcome a lot of different kinds of groups to be nominated and to be ultimately selected. And that's wonderful, but also having some criteria can really help you as a group have that sense of purpose and connection to the values of the groups to be able to really push and work on some of these challenges and inequities that exist in the funding and where it flows. So in terms of some criteria that you can consider, there's a whole bunch of them, and we'll go across all of them and welcome your questions as well. Number one is the size of the group. This is, and when I say group, I mean nonprofit. I also mean, which is like a nuance in the nonprofit landscape here in the US based on tax policy, is that there's a category of groups called fiscally sponsored organizations. Those are groups who technically don't have their own 501c3 status, but they are basically housed within a nonprofit. They're a project of a nonprofit, so they still get the benefit of having a sort of 501c3 status and really doing the same work as a nonprofit without having that formal tax designation, which is quite burdensome to get that tax designation and the things that are required there. And so just want to open your eyes a little bit to the possibility that there are thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of groups that are fiscally sponsored outside of the nonprofit landscape that exists. And through Grapevine, you can totally direct your funding to fiscally sponsored organizations. All you have to do is let Gabby and the team know through the back end what the fiscal sponsor is of that org, and then they can direct the money that way. So that is a really baseline, powerful thing to open up your mind. And what we love about Giving Circles is that it helps expand for people in it their understanding of civil society sector and what it means to make change. And so even just getting all of the hundreds of folks that are in all of your Giving Circles and Grapevines to even understand what a fiscally sponsored organization is and why they're important and powerful, that alone, to extrapolate that out to the size of this movement, is really, really powerful. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is to look at the budget size of the nonprofits that or fiscally sponsored groups that you're considering. And the reason I say this is that the nonprofit landscape, the inequities, again, are so stark. So basically the top 400 nonprofits, the ones that you know all the names of, Nature Conservancy, Red Cross, all Environmental Defense Fund, like all of the ones that have the big names that you know, they get 80% of all of the money goes to like a tiny number of groups because they have huge marketing teams. They have the ability to really push on direct mailers and like having a whole operating machine behind it. And I think for me and for Ty and our team around what's so powerful around Giving Circles is that Giving Circles basically can provide that seed capital for smaller grassroots groups to get off the ground. And so the criteria relates a little bit to the nonprofit selection, which we'll talk about next. But as your members might be throwing names into the ring of who to suggest as a group, they might be suggesting larger organizations. That's not their fault, right? That's the ones that we all know. It's the brand recognition, but it's about helping your members understand why that isn't always the best thing, that those groups already have those huge operations in place to get all the money. So how can our Giving Circle, if that aligns with your values, really push on the smaller ones? So a really great way to think about that is groups under $1 million. That's a very common number that we use a lot that helps sort of weed out a lot of the big ones. Even under 2 million or 3 million, there's so many groups that hit that really small number. We also know a ton of Giving Circles that focus on less than 500,000, like the really, really tiny seedling groups that are just getting started. And one nice thing to think through is look at the amount your group is giving at a total amount. Let's say you're giving $5,000 or $10,000, and then compare that ratio to the total budget of the organization, and think about that math, right? If you're giving a grant of $5,000 to a group that has $50 million, your donation is not even going to be a drop in the hat. If you're giving $5,000 to a group that only brings in $500,000, you're actually making a meaningful, significant difference to that group. So budget size is number one. Location of group. This is helpful. I know a lot of you are really hyper local, and that's fantastic. So much can happen at the local level. And by naming location as being really core to what you're doing, it can then help over time. Your group can be the place where, everybody in Flagstaff or some smaller city, your Grapevine page, right, has then a list of amazing groups potentially in your hyperlocal area. And so then you start being part of this broader ecosystem trying to push for what local change is and lifting up the amazing groups on the ground. So even though that might be intuitive for some of you, that you are, the name of a city might be in the exact name of your location, even just having a conversation with your membership around what that is, what that geographic boundary is, can be really helpful. Hi, do you want to talk about the third one?
Yeah, for sure. Strong leadership of your staff and board that mirrors the community. This is a big one, y'all. I think that at a time where DEI is a real priority for a lot of us organizationally, as well as just within ourselves, we're trying to figure out ways in how we can show up and be more inclusive and more diverse with our communities and such like that within our giving circles. And so when you think about your criteria and your granting, your leadership, the staff, your board, they should mirror your community, right? And so figuring out how we can bring those that have that lived experiences as part of your criteria of your grant making is super duper important. And so ideally, what you would want to do is have some people that have that experience and lens, that relatability is important to have that voice as you all are considering of the groups that you want to give to. So having that strong leadership on staff that mirrors the community, or even have just some kind of experience, if they don't demographically mirror the community, are they from that community or tied to that issue, or just having that experience as part of your leadership team is super duper important.
And to clarify, Ty, this is about the nonprofit itself. So this is about, like, if it's a group serving Black communities, let's say, in your region, the leadership of that nonprofit should be a Black leader, the staff of that organization.
Correct. Yes, correct, Isis. Yes. I mean, we want all the leadership of organizations that have a say-so to mirror the communities of the communities that they serve, period. And so that is something that you all should consider. The fourth piece, the powerful programs that are connected to their mission. The values, we talked so much even in the last workshop about values and how that shows up as it relates to the organizations and their missions or whatnot. And so taking a look to see if they are truly in alignment with what they say that they do. Their programs are really tied to the values and their mission of what they are trying to accomplish. If there is some, oh, sorry, someone said something. Yeah, if there is some kind of mismatch there, then I think that is something for, if there is some kind of if you all see some kind of discrepancy there, I think that is something for the group to discuss and to dissect a little further. But ideally, their values should align with the missions and their programs and what they do. So if they're an organization that are supporting women and girls, that should show up in their programmings and how they go about all of their activities or such. So just connecting, ensuring that the programs is in full alignment of the mission and they're actually doing what they say they want to do, because we trust that they're doing the work, right?
And one example of that is that sometimes folks only look at the mission statement, and mission statements are like 10 words, right? It's a very short articulation of what an organization does. So actually, by encouraging your members to look at the programming that they offer, that really offers a lot more insight into what that group does over a perfectly crafted 10-word mission statement. And so just wanting to, like, pushing people to dig a little bit deeper, that's really the provocation here. Of course, from a criteria perspective, it's hard to quantify that all the time, but it's even more just, how do you think about criteria as a lens for how your members are looking at groups to potentially nominate?
Totally. And I know, for my giving circle here, so I'm a leader of a giving circle. I'm chair-elect for Heritage Giving Fund. We are the first Black giving circle established in the state of Texas. And we fund organizations, super small budgets that are less than $500K, that are led by Black women that serve women and girls. So very tight alignment, right? And so in terms of our criteria, one of the most powerful things in my experience that we have for our members is when they do the site visits, y'all, and when we go out to these organizations, we like to see them in action. we like to see our grantees in action and taking a look at their social media pages and like just really seeing how they are showing up and really living truthfully in alignment with the mission and the programs and the work that they are doing. And so that's just a engagement piece for you all that y'all can consider. It. Site visits is something that you are consider. That's a powerful way how to really see where the programs and the mission is aligned. Incredible presence for the state. I think so, Jessica, for sure. You want me to keep going, Isis? You want me to hit on the other one?
No, I think this is great for criteria. I think one more thing on that third one of strong leadership on staff and board is that we're really pushing as Philanthropy Together that organizations led by people of color receive far less funding than organizations led by white leaders. That is just part of the systemic racism that exists in our world. And so, another simple criteria can be that you focus specifically on Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders. And I think the point here about mirroring the community is, let's say your group is really focused on, LGBTQ issues or something, right? Race and issue area and other lived identities are so interconnected. And so you might have a white leader that identifies as LGBTQ, and you might have a Black leader that identifies as LGBTQ. And so how do you add some nuance into your criteria here based on if you're focusing on a certain issue or what that might look like? Any questions about this criteria slide before we move on?
I had a question about the budget. Is that something that we would find for the nonprofit online, or is that something we would ask them, or do we have to dig for it somewhere? I don't know how easy or difficult it is to get.
Great question. It's actually super easy. If you know, each nonprofit in the world, in the US, has what's called an EIN number, which is their tax identification code. I don't know if Gabby, if you have an EIN number offhand that you could chat me, but literally if you type in that EIN number and then write 990. 990 is the form that you look at that every nonprofit has to file. And it's very easy on that form to quickly see their total budget for the year. So that's a very practical thing that you could do. So, okay, Ty just sent me one. I'll show you here. So if I go EIN plus, oh, it's not chatting. Okay,
463. Yeah.
366. Okay, and then if I go 990, so EIN, the number, and then 990, you'll see here it comes up, and ProPublica is a great free resource. And if you look at that, this is an organization, looks like it's called GEMS Camp. And then if you go down here, you can see their latest filing was in 2020. This is often common. The IRS is so backlogged with things, you probably will only find 2020 as the last time that folks have filed their taxes. That doesn't mean that they haven't filed their taxes in the last 3 years, just more on the IRS side. And then you can see here what their total revenue is. So this is a tiny organization. Again, $55,000. Like that, how does that even cover one person's salary? And so this really shows you how so many groups, especially smaller groups led by people of color, doing incredible work at the local grassroots level, are doing so with complete scraps, and Giving Circles can make such a meaningful difference. If you gave them $5,000, that would literally be 10% of their entire budget. And I also want to dispel the myth that like, oh, well, you don't want to give them 10% of their entire budget. That would make them too reliant on you, or, they wouldn't be able to handle that amount of money. All of the research shows that that is literally not true. Folks can handle those, that amount of money, and it helps folks these nonprofits get to the next step in terms of their capacity, being able to hire someone, being able to invest in a new program. So it's really important to think through that. Great question, Helen. These are the nitty-gritty things.
Yeah, good question.
Any other questions on the criteria? All righty. So the next question is, how can you communicate your criteria? I know you're thinking, okay, cool. Even if we had a list of criteria, what does that look like? And so here's a number of different ways you can think about that. Number one is I really want to start with a provocation of how do you think across informal and formal moments that you can do that communication. So think about when a new member joins. How are you sharing with them what your criteria are for the groups that you're giving to? How can that be viewed not as a here are the rules of our giving circle, and more like, here's how we plan on moving our values in the world. We do so by showing very clearly this is what our criteria are. So there's ways to connect that in really beautiful, empowering language. Think about those stats I shared, right? If your group really cares about women and girls issue, include the fact that so little funding is going to women and girls. If you plan on focusing on groups led by leaders of color, talk about how so often leaders of color led organizations don't receive funding. So there's ways to make that really inspiring, and ways that your new members can then feel very connected to the criteria. Again, not as a policing function, but as a way to move your values in the world. Think about how you're going to remind folks of those criteria at each meeting. Could you have a slide or a one-pager or a post that you share? Like, how does that become really clear? I think an amazing goal would be that every single member of your giving circle can walk away saying, yeah, I'm part of this Grapevine group or this giving circle. We fund small grassroots groups under $1 million, led by people of color, going to women and girls issue, because we know that that's going to make the most tangible difference in our community. Being able to say that kind of a powerful sentence is huge. It means that the impact of your giving circle will go far beyond just the group that you have, to every single person that person in your giving circle speaks about and talks to. Think about how to put it on your Grapevine page. Is there a way that you can pin something or have it at the top or have it as part of your description? Oh, sorry, this bullet is from the last slide. Ty, any other ideas you have for ways to communicate that you want to add?
No, you're touching on a lot of good pieces. I just want to say that, especially for y'all that are, just kind of getting started, this piece and embedding that and cementing that in your members, that criteria, because one of you said, who is that Heidi, you said that, you've never contributed to the smaller local nonprofits, right? And so
Yes.
that mind shift for you, Heidi, of like,
Huge.
it's huge, right? And so the way that you all communicate has to be consistently, openly, and often, especially because your members need to get a feel for the criteria, and they need to understand why you all are granting, really feel connected to your granting process. That's only going to help them engage more, right? Because when your members really feel connected to your circle, they understand the why y'all are granting the way that you do, your criteria, it's only going to really fuel them and spark them, y'all, to engage more deeply within a giving circle and advocate for these organizations, even beyond the dollar, which that's another huge piece and the uniqueness of the giving circle. So Isis, you touched on everything. I just want to bring it home by saying how often and upfront, especially as you all are starting off, how important that is to over communicate your criteria.
I can see.
Love.
So I was just going to say, just something to call out in the chat here. Holly is on this sort of topic, wondering about best ways to communicate, on the feed of the Grapevine page. How do you guys suggest that?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to say is do it as frequently and often as you can. And I think the provocation of what is the tight one sentence articulation of your criteria. So it's not like a 10 bulleted list that becomes really burdensome. People can't remember a 10 bullet list. They can remember 3 things. They can remember a tight sentence that feels inspiring. And so doing a little bit of that work to think about how to articulate that. And we're happy to do some digging and find some other giving circles that do that. But there's so many that's the beauty of giving circles, right? There's thousands of them all around the world. So look at how other people are describing their criteria. Beg, borrow, and steal it. Who cares if you have the same exact criteria as somebody else, right? This is the work that the world needs, and piggyback on that in your own context. But yes, on your feed, on your social posts, this would be a great post to say, this Grapevine or giving circle cares about this, and therefore we focus on nonprofits who do XYZ or who fit this criteria. That is a whole piece of content that you could have.
And Heidi, I know you have a question, but I have one other comment real quick. Isis, for our, we have a Launchpad for Hosts program that's currently happening right now. And one of the things we did this year was we have a home-based doc, because you know how you over communicate a lot. You're sending your members so much stuff sometimes that I found that our little home-based doc that has it's a document that has all the hyperlinks, all the information. It's like a one-stop shop for all the things, the most important information that your members need to know. I can see y'all using something like that. And that's simple. It's a Google Doc. So let's just say if you have already listed your criteria, you will hyperlink that onto your home base and just say, hey, when in doubt, and if you ever feel lost or whatever, any information about the circle, our criteria, like our grant cycles, meeting dates, all of that, refer it back to just one singular home-based doc. I really have enjoyed for my own self to keep up with all of the different things. And that's the best practice I want to share with y'all. But Heidi, you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this makes so much sense to me. And it also seems that it must be easier to drive. I suspect it's easier to drive engagement with the entire group because it's not as hard for them to sit down and, maybe they don't need an hour and a half to look through a whole slew of nonprofits, but you can actually direct them in a way that makes sense, that makes the search a lot easier, less time consuming, helps make people more confident. And I'm wondering, Taisha, if you found that as your group went along and you really began to focus more clearly on criteria, did you find more engagement? Did you notice any changes internally?
Yes, and actually, Heidi, the engagement, I think it was like thought leadership engagement. Like, so our sisters were suggesting other ways. Like, yes. So to answer your question, absolutely. I think our circle is small, and so we bring our members and encourage them because we don't have we want this to be a collaborative experience that works for everyone. So that feedback into our criteria, the feedback, it only sparked other ways for our members to think differently and more fluidly and more expansively about other ways and how they can find organizations and how we can, things that we should consider. Like, it just sparked a deeper level of kind of conversations, and that is engagement because we're learning together. So yes, I saw increases in that learning engagement, if that makes sense, in terms of us just bouncing off ideas and better ways and how we can show up for the circle and refine some of our processes.
And I think across the board, we've seen that there are so many of the giving circles that are a little bit tighter. There's often this misconception that, if we have narrowed focus area, that's going to limit so much stuff. And it's really the opposite. The narrower you get, the more your mind expands of like, oh my gosh, we've heard about in Charlotte, let's say, there are 300 Black-led nonprofits just in Charlotte, North Carolina, right? And that, like, if you really hone in more, you will start to find the smaller groups that are probably invisible. And that's the exciting, beautiful work. Holly?
Because I know I'm talking too much, but Isis, thank you so much for saying that. I'm telling y'all, I told y'all about Heritage and how we're so tight and aligned, like small organizations that serve women and girls that are led Black women, right? And that was something that we thought about. We were like, is it? Does North Texas, right? But we were very unapologetic about our values. And we were like, that is what it is. And so even if it is a small group of people, that's the small group of people that we want to support. But it came out, to your point, Isis, there was so many Black-led nonprofits in North Texas and in Fort Worth that we didn't know until we knew and set our criteria and more intentionally sought out to find them. And so, yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop.
Holly, go for it.
Yeah, Holly.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. So I am with the Wichita Women for Good, and our membership's over 200. Our participation, though, is less than that, contributing members. And we've been around for 3 quarters now. We just finished up our 3rd quarter cycle. We're giving over 5,000 now. So we're super excited about that. But one of my questions, and that's why it was, how do we communicate the best way to our membership, is I'm assuming on our feed. And I love the idea of a home base document in Google. I think I'll set that up today. I'm one of 4 leaders, but kind of the other 3 leaders have they're not participating. One dropped out completely. And at our last event, we had about 20 members show up and decided that we want to meet monthly to reorganize our membership, our goals and our mission, and possibly do leadership committees, because we want, like, of the 4 areas of leadership, if one person is a leader and they have conflicts on their schedule for the event, then we want to have backups. We want to have more people available for that. And I just wanted to get your guys's, opinion of how you handle that. Taisha, I wondered how many people you have in your giving group too. And I'll give the floor to you guys.
So right now Heritage has 57 members. And in terms of like your engagement, I'm sorry, and Holly, I was listening to you, but I want to make sure I'm answering exactly the specific question you're asking. Like, in terms of engagement specifically, what are you asking?
What's the best way to communicate to, because we have, the only criteria we have is that it has to be a local nonprofit that benefits our community in some way. We did have a few people concerned about like the larger national organizations, but they do have a presence here in our local community and are helping our local community. And then we've had some other women in our group that want to make it focused on women benefited or led groups. Because we have had we're a women's group, and
Right.
we've had quite a few people nominate like men's ministries and stuff like that. So it's like,
Yeah, so I think, honestly, Holly, it goes back to kind of what we're talking about right now, just being consistent and being very transparent with some of your the things that you all, once you all have made the decision making around what you all want to fund, and that should be, and I know you're growing, so so as y'all are making those decisions, using some tools like Mentimeter and things like that to kind of to reach a decision so that everyone will know exactly what you all are standing for in terms of your criteria, and then reconfirming that often, because especially with y'all, Holly, I'm sure you're gonna have new members coming on in.
Yeah.
They gotta play catch up type deal. So you all are gonna have to consistently communicate not just your criteria, but even how y'all reach the decision making around that criteria. I think that's super important for newbies to come in so that they'll know, like, in terms of like how you all got to reach as a collective the decisions around who you want to fund.
And I'd add that I think this whole conversation is really about how to decide on the values of the group, which was the previous workshop that I think Gabby can share.
Okay.
And how do you move those values in the world in an accountable way? And these criteria and how you select groups just connects those two one-to-one. And so engagement we see comes from people understanding why they're there, how it connects to their personal values, what the values of the group are as a whole, and then the consistency of, okay, and then here's who we're funding because these are our values. And those are deeper, bigger questions to talk about as a group that isn't just, suggest a name, right? This is about, why are we all here? What do we want to see in our communities? How can we make the world the way that we all want to see it? And then we really, really see that can help on engagement. So I would push you on thinking not just the best way of how to communicate it, but like, what are you communicating and how do you use that as an engagement tool to push people to have those deeper conversations?
Okay, sounds great. I appreciate it. And Taisha, what was that tool that you suggested?
It's called Mentimeter. We
MEN.
love it. Yeah, we love it. So like you can literally, let's just say you You ask your members, see, Isis is awesome. This is why she's like a master facilitator, but in real time, she's gonna pull it up, but we can say like, okay, what are y'all pick your top 4 values. So everybody would type in their 4 values, and then this system and its algorithm stuff it'll populate the ones that are coming out, like it'll do its jam. And you see for this group, humanity, equity, community, and compassion, and a little bit of equity, 5 core values is showing up for this group. You see that? And then so your members, I love it so much because I'm a visual person. I need to see it. And like, it's just cool to kind of see how all of our individual values then are manifested and lived out loud collectively. And it's powerful. And then everyone gets it.
I do love this.
Walks away like, wow, like equity is really our jam. Like, so then apply that and let that be one of your core values if you're giving.
And beyond word clouds, it also has, you could do, for example, if you're trying to decide on criteria, you could put up polls that say, here are 6 ways we're thinking about it. We're thinking about grassroots under 1 million. We're thinking about people of color-led organizations. We're thinking about defining our issue area more and get people to poll vote on it. And then that really helps from a discussion standpoint, getting down to, okay, we all agree on grassroots. Great. We don't have to spend 30 minutes talking about that, and instead focus in on the conversation with all of our precious limited time only to the sticking points where there seems to be a difference of opinion. And then you might need to go offline afterwards to resolve that depending on how the group is landing. And it's free. So couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually I had a word cloud thing going with them, but how do you get people, like, is this something on the Menti thing that you do as a Zoom, or how do you
can do it on Zoom? You can do
Okay.
it on Zoom, and you see like, so it'll send you, you will like tell everyone, go to this. Okay.
Okay, share. Okay.
Yeah, you just click the share button, and then
Okay.
this is the link that, and we can do it right now. I can send this link out to all of you.
Okay.
And then once you get that link, that's actually what people, I can show you what it looks like on the front end. It looks like this, and then you enter the words, and then you click submit, and then it would add it to the word cloud.
Thank you so much for that. And
Come to
then
the facilitation training. When is that, Gabby? Next month?
Exactly. I'm like, don't want to miss that one, y'all.
And I have one other question. When you guys are talking about researching the nonprofits deeply, like the 990s, are you doing that on every nomination, or are you doing that only like on your top 3?
That's
and
a
then
great
sharing that
question.
information with the group? How do you communicate that?
So if part of what you're saying to your members is we all have a commitment to small groups, then you would put that onus, if let's say your model is to get nominations from members, you would then put that onus and everyone would agree to, yes, I will only nominate somebody, an organization that is under 1 million. So then the person itself, the member of your group, would do that digging on the 990s. You could have a really strict policy of like double checking the final winners or whatever to make sure. But I think this is more about trusting that the members are trying to put forth that like, this is what we're all trying to do. And I would remind everyone that there's so many great groups out there, and you also don't have to nominate new people every single time, right? Like if you come up with a great list of groups that really hit on all the, quadrants that you want to hit, there's no reason why you can't consider one of those groups in the future. Like you don't always have to ask members to do new research and new digging every single time. So I think that's also like, we're often talking about these mindset shifts, and that's one of them that we wanted to share too. I'm going to keep going, but these are fantastic questions. So this dovetails perfectly into our next section, was how can you find nonprofit organizations or fiscally sponsored organizations to support? And we have a number of different ways to think about that. So number one is that you totally can start with your own members. Your members likely have connections to certain groups in their city or in their wherever geography they are, and really put forth groups that they think about. I think where this can sometimes be a tension is that if it's somebody that they just have worked with before, they personally love, that group might not align with the criteria. And this where it does get a little bit sticky. There's no 2 ways around that. But if you can, as a group, come together about why we care about these criterias and why we're focusing on that, then hopefully the membership, even as they're thinking about groups, they can really think more about the groups that align with those criteria instead of just somebody that they happen to be connected to. The second one is, depending on who's in your group, really think about the other nonprofit leaders in your community or the ones that have the know-how on the ground. I think one of the challenges about giving circles is that the donors and the folks in them don't often know who is doing great work in their community. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just that is what it is. And there's so much that can be elevated by community members in these giving circles. And also it's a recognition that there is so much learning to be done around the work that is happening in the local nonprofit ecosystem. And so then it's about how do you start to build those authentic relationships and really try to get the insight from the ground around what is important and powerful and happening in your community and elevate that to the giving circle. So that's another consideration, which is similar to this talk to the leaders in the field and community. Another great resource is to look at the groups other collective giving groups fund. These could be giving circles, these are going to be collaborative funds. There's so many amazing groups that are, and these could be community foundations. Like there's so many other folks doing this kind of work in your city, in your issue space, whatever that might be. And these organizations, especially if they're small, amazing if they have 2 giving circles funding them, right? Like it doesn't have to be that your giving circle only funds groups that have never gotten funding before by a giving circle, right? Like everyone's always looking for funding. And so don't be afraid to look at the lists of other folks as well. Internet sleuthing can totally work. I think this can lead people down a rabbit hole of not knowing, like, how do I find things? How do I know what to trust? One big thing we want to raise is that, there are these sites like Charity Navigator and others that do the nonprofit rating system. And I cannot be more clear about this. That can be a really harmful thing for some of these groups. The way that those groups are, the way that nonprofits are rated on these kinds of rating systems doesn't always equate to whether that group is doing wonderful work in their community. It might be like you lose points for not having your website listed. They might not have the staff resources to even know that they're listed on a site called Charity Navigator and that they need to list their website, right? Like there's so many considerations that come into place. Of course, we are not advocating for funding to be used in an irresponsible way. And we understand that there is fraud in the nonprofit landscape, but I think the mindset of we can't trust nonprofits or that we have to look at only perfect 5-star rated groups is really problematic. And it just brings in all of the bias around why smaller groups continue to not get funding and why the large groups continue to get all of the funding. So I can't say that more clearly enough, but like take that with a grain of salt and just like do a little bit of your own independent research and thinking beyond what some of these groups are rated at. And then the last thing is that there are amazing lists of other groups. One of them that I'll put up here right now is Giving Compass. If you haven't heard of Giving Compass, it's an example of a site that does some of this sort of sharing about wonderful groups out there in the world. And you can focus on issue area, you can focus on location, all of those kinds of things. Another one is called every.org, which is just a way to surface a bunch of different organizations. But what I really love about them is that I have found that they make it really easy. Let me see. They have women-led as a cause area. You can look at all these different ones. They have like Black-led and Latinx-led. They have a lot of helpful lists like that that are really powerful. And then looking at some of the groups, you can also click in and they have down here the size of the organization. So you can see here, this organization has $6.5 million in the bank, right? That this is, that's not a tiny organization. It's a little bit more mid-sized. And if I go back to another one here quickly, like the Special Olympics, let's see how much they have in the bank, right? Large organization, 135 million. It doesn't mean that the Special Olympics isn't doing incredible work. It also doesn't mean that your giving circle should probably fund the Special Olympics. So that's specifically what we mean by that budget size ratio. And so I have found this to be a really easy way to look at the size of an organization in issue area with some filters and lift that up to your group. So bottom line, there are amazing internet tools out there already that are doing a bunch of these really great lists, and don't be don't be nervous about looking at some of them. That can be really helpful. Anything else you want to add on this one, Ty, finding great groups?
No, I'll drop a link for one of this other platform. They're called Giving Gap. And so they also are like kind of like Giving Compass. They are a database for Black-led nonprofit organizations. And so, yeah, just perusing around the internet, but Giving Gap is a good resource if that's your jam for if you're looking to support Black-led nonprofit organizations. And so, yeah, databases, y'all. Giving Gap is one of them, one of my faves.
Thanks, Ty. Yeah, they're incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is really it. And we want to leave some time for questions. I do want to address one other thing, which is sometimes we get this question about political and how to screen for that, or what does that look like? By definition, under the tax code, 501c3 nonprofits are not meant to engage in political activities or lobbying. There's a whole other category called a 501c4, and they're the advocacy organizations that do that. But the lines get really blurry, and we've seen examples of 501c3 status organizations who are on the margins of doing political work. That isn't a bad thing, but it goes back to your values. It has to align with the values of the group. And so just wanting to sort of frame that and state that out loud, that sometimes we've seen groups that say like no political organizations, and what's challenging is any 501c3 technically is not a political organization. And so then you're going to get into this very murky water of looking case by case at the work that they do and whether or not it aligns with the group, what the group's values and membership want to see in the world. And that's why we really strongly suggest that you can't just have criteria, you also have to have the values of the group, that those go hand in hand. And that's when you'll be able to make a determination around whether a group should or should not be included. Doing those in silo of one another is going to keep you having tricky conversations if groups are doing slightly political work in a way that does or does not align with your members' values. We got plenty of time for questions. I will leave our emails up here for a little bit. Happy to answer more questions, and otherwise I'll turn the slides off and open it up to the space.
I just have a question on that, Isis, actually, in terms of the political piece. I know you're saying it kind of goes back, it goes back to the values, but what if people just view something being political as very differently, like their definition? How do you suggest people approach that?
Yeah, honestly, it's really hard. And this is why I love the model of a giving circle, because what it encourages us all to do is that we all have something to learn and we all have something to share, and we can grow in our understanding of the world and what should and should get funded. And also, I think it's a really strong reminder that some people's political ideologies stop at a point where they cannot condone thing X or thing Y, and that is like a hard red line for them. And those are like that's why they're called hot button issues, right? Like those are the things that end up really dividing a group. And so like leaning in, if you purposely want to be a kind of group that has, plurality as a value, which I, personally really value, like we all need to be able to see others' humanity and do that kind of interrogation, then it requires us to also be able to hold the space for nuanced conversation, that just doing this off of a poll or what have you doesn't make space for that kind of pluralistic, deep, interrogative conversation. And so when those pieces come up, coming at them with a methodology of safe discussion spaces and naming what we will and will not talk about, naming how folks can be in a safe space, in a brave space for how they're talking and hearing each other out is really important. Many giving circles, the research calls them like bridging giving circles, where they're very intentionally inclusive of a lot of different ideologies and viewpoints. And the whole beauty of it is that folks come to mutual agreement, even if you might not agree with one particular aspect of a group. There's also plenty of groups like TIES, for example, that are more what's called bonding circles in the research. Those are groups who have very clear alignment and values in one particular direction and are really gung-ho about moving that in the world from a space of belonging, like again, TIES group, a group in Dallas, all Black women, funding Black women and girls. So there are two ways that you can consider what your group is aiming to do in the world and hold space for conversation. It's hard, it's nuanced. There's no easy answer. Peg?
Yeah, I represent 100 Women Who Care Elk Rapids, and Elk Rapids is a small community in northern Michigan. We have 1,500 people population. The entire county is 24,000 people. But we have an incredibly active group of women, to over 200, who all have given. So we have the capacity to do some really great things in a very small community. That, because we're in a rural northern part of Michigan, we have some challenges that I think, you know, in finding nonprofits. So some of the ideas that you had here, I'm absolutely going to go see what we can do to find nonprofits that serve our community, because that's really our only definition. One of the challenges that I've struggled with a little bit, and I think some of the other leaders in our group have struggled with, is that faith-based organizations do a lot. I mean, they're the movers and shakers in our little county. So we try to walk this line between supporting them. They're nonprofits. They don't limit their services to just members of their congregation. But there's always this kind of, you know, we don't know always if they're proselytizing or, you know, they're using their programs as a way to evangelize. And I don't know if I'm saying this well, but it's been a challenge at times to find nonprofits that are doing good work, that help the community, but that aren't overtly religious in their mission. And I'm wondering if you have any guidance on that. Whoops, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. I was just thinking out loud. Thinking to myself, I think your members are going to be a huge asset to finding the organizations, I think, for those, because for your tight, small community, I would imagine that there are some like your members, like there's no other way. I literally would start with my members first, like asking them explicitly, like, you know, boots on ground, ears on ground, y'all, we got to find them. Like, let's uncover every rock type deal. Like your people for sure are going to be a very important to help you find nonprofits. And I also would go to like religious affiliates, like organizations. So example, if y'all have a chamber of commerce, or if you have
and we've met with the community. I mean, we've actually gone to the Community Foundation in Grand Traverse County, which is near us. And they've provided some guidance as well, which is great. But the reality is that if we are going to give to the nonprofits that are probably having the greatest impact on our local residents, I would say over 50% of them are faith-based. And it's more, and we're not necessarily opposed to doing that. It's just, how do we kind of get comfortable with the use of our money not being used? And maybe it's something that we just have to work through. But I thought maybe others had, you know, I think in smaller communities, certainly you encounter that. And I wondered if anybody had any ideas about how you kind of, you know, deal with that issue.
And I also think, like, in addition to like finding organizations that are not religious or whatnot, if that's your jam, I also think what you're asking us right here and having the conversation with your members, that like openly, and y'all talking through that, because if that is, friend, if your members are okay with giving to to organizations that have a spent towards, you know, that have a religious sense or whatnot, but they're in alignment with your other core values, and the group is okay with that, then they're okay with that. But you won't know unless you all have this kind of open conversation, exactly how you're doing it with us, in an open and transparent way, and then getting some feedback, and you all collectively deciding, okay, do we want to do, like, you know, 50% what we award to organizations that are religious? Like, that's where really you lean into the spirit. You all, every circle is unique, and every community is very different. And so you lean into that. That's your community. And so if those are organizations that are doing amazing things, but they have that piece of that element that's not non-negotiable for your collective, then rock on type deal. But if it is,
I'd also add that knowing what the this goes back to, like, it's not just about lists on the internet, it's about, like, really being in deep community relationship. And so you might decide, like, this, I think too often some groups, like, every single time they're nominating new groups, and they're always, the activity that folks do is finding new groups. And if you can shift your mindset instead to, how can we do a little bit of digging for a few months and use some of our cycles to find a great slate of groups, and then for the next year, just give to those. We know that our group already feels great about them. How do we go deeper with them? How do we get more funding to them? It shifts the activity of your group from just the sourcing and the hunting to the impact, which ultimately that's why we're all here. So don't feel like this is going to be a never-ending battle that you always have to find new groups and always have the discussion about whether or not to fund them. Like, get over that phase somehow in the next few months, and then go digger. And then if you decide that that list has been exhausted, then you can re-up that and do that again.
Great. Thank you both.
Holly?
Hi, I appreciate that, Isis. That was one of my questions, because we have gotten into that mindset of trying to keep finding. And is it okay if we renominate very good ones that we've found in the previous cycles? So I appreciate
1,000,000%. Like, the newness factor, I think, is just, it's like another tie. We should write a whole blog post on myths, but, like, there's so many things that are just, like, who cares if a group has been nominated before? Who cares if they've been given to before? We see so many giving circles also leaning into trust-based philanthropy practice, where they give the same group. It might not be the full amount, but it helps organizations have that long-term sustainability. So it really begs the question of why new is better and new isn't better. Like, you know, go back to the list. You could nominate the same groups again, or even get past the nomination and just have it be about, here's a fantastic list. Let's decide right now where we think our community needs these dollars and go from there.
Okay, so it is possible then just to make the list, and as it moves forward, I mean, as long as everybody's good with those nonprofits on the list, to keep them on the general list, to be
You can
random.
do whatever you want. That's the beauty of the giving circle. Like, there's no rules and there's no regulation. You can do you, Holly, and I would really encourage you to think like that. And also, like, view it this way. Imagine if you had 10 amazing groups that everyone in your membership was excited about. How then, if all of your members followed then those 10 groups on social media, signed up to their newsletters, actually started building those relationships to know what those groups are doing on the ground. And then you can see month over month, cycle over cycle, wow, this group really is having a hard moment. This group is pulling off a new campaign to try something. So then you're giving in response to what the community needs, and not just in response to what the members are trying to put out on a nomination list.
I love this. Yes, I appreciate you so much. And I feel like a lot of the women in my group feel the same way as what you've expressed today, and lots of great ideas that I can take to them, and we can build on this. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
You, Heidi?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what was just said. What's coming through to me really loudly and clearly, and I can't get over how wonderful the name Grapevine is, because grapes grow, right? Vines get bigger, they branch, they do whatever. Yeah, sorry, the metaphor just really hits me. But what I'm hearing is that ultimately there are very few hard and fast rules. And what's really important is that we build connection and we become I'm not sure about the right adjectives, but vibrant was what came to mind, part of our community. That we become embedded as a giving circle within our community. I love the idea of following what these groups are doing with what we're giving them. And I love, yes, become a community collaborating for change. I really, this is awesome. I mean, every time I attend one of these, it just keeps getting better and better and better. So thank you all very much. But yeah, I really, it just makes a lot of sense to me. It is more than just what we're doing. It's all of those values and the purpose and the connection behind what we're doing.
Thank you for sharing that, Heidi. And y'all, I know we're at time, but I do want to just share one final, I hope that it motivates and really encourages y'all to push through with all of your work. Heritage Giving Fund, I'll tell you, one of the things that last year we took off purposely to work on like our strategic plan, give our members some rest, because we were heavily involved with all of the 2020 out in the streets and organizing and such. But I say that because our grantee partners, y'all, yes, we gave them those multi-year grants that came from our collective, but Heritage, we're most powerful with the beyond the dollar piece and how we support and advocate for our grantees. And I'll tell y'all, one of our grantee partners, she came and told, and now we're about to intentionally start tracking this, our grantee partners and the concurrent connections and the grants and such that they now, because we have helped increase their visibility, the way that our members have shared their information, advocated for them, joined their boards. It's that piece that really where we start to see that our impact and our extensions grow. Viola's House is one of our grantee partners. And so we worked with the CEO who, she didn't have a development officer at the time, but our sisters knew how to grant write. We knew how to fundraise. And so we end up helping doing like consultation, pro bono consultation to help them grant write and to get into the United Way pitch contest. And so these are extensions, y'all, I promise you, that's gonna happen, I promise, with your grantee partners, just based off y'all gift. Don't ever think that your gift is small, because it's all of that beyond the dollar piece and such, and the support and the love and the advocacy and just wrap around love that you all are gonna provide for your grantees. That's going to engage your members, that's going to bring in new funding, more visibility for your grantee partners, and shift the mindsets of your members who are going to start showing up even more fully in community beyond your giving circle. And so I just share that with y'all as just for us to just keep moving forward in this work. And because we don't even know the level of our impact even beyond right now. Y'all won't know it until it comes and y'all really start moving that money and really loving and building good, authentic relationships with your grantee partners. It's going to change everything, I promise. So stay in here, ladies. Y'all doing very well. And Isis and I, in partnership with Grapevine, we're going to be doing these we're doing these workshops for y'all to answer these questions and to bring your concerns, and also to celebrate our wins and what's happening and best practices and such. So come to the next one. I think the next one we share the date. I'll turn it back over to you, Gabby, because I know we're at time. We got to wrap up, but I get fired up, and I'm fired up right now and excited about y'all circles. So come back and keep going forward, keep going, and don't overthink anything. Just keep doing.
What a perfect way to end. I completely agree. Thank you so much, Taisha, and to Isis for sharing this and all your wonderful questions for everyone who joined. Our next one is going to be April 12th, and that is on defining shared values. So that's a great one to come to. And then the next one will be in May, and I'll send that in the follow-up as well. And that will be around facilitation, having hard conversations with your group, fostering engagement, all that stuff. So hope to see you at the next one, and anyone who's around. And in 2 hours, we're doing our member mixer as well on Zoom. So we hope to see some of you there. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too.